Our next storytellers, our last, they will come up as a tandem. They have interwoven stories that merge on Lexington Green. Nancy, from her neighborhood in Lexington, Bestor from his tour in Vietnam. After the personal stories of how they both came to the Green, they will show you a short film clip from the film Unfinished Symphony by Bestor Cram that is archival footage from right here in Lexington, Memorial Day 1971. Let me give you just a bit of background about Nancy, and Nancy will then introduce Bestor. Nancy is a longtime member of First Parish. She was arrested in 1971 on Lexington Green along with 457 of her closest friends who were peacefully protesting the Vietnam War. She later worked with Lexington Oral History Projects to create a permanent record of that historic peace protest. Will you please welcome Nancy Earsy.
It all began when Norma McGavran called asking me to cook spaghetti for the Vietnam veterans against the war. I said yes. I cooked and stood ready to welcome the veterans to Lexington. 3 days later, I was arrested on Lexington Green with 457 other citizens. When I told Norma I'd cooked spaghetti, the peace movement had already attracted many Lexington. I'm sorry.
Would you like me to move this?
Sorry, I couldn't see well. Had already attracted many Lexington residents to oppose the Vietnam War. In 1969, Moratorium Day drew a large crowd to Lexington Green. People left work early and teenagers gathered on the steps of First Parish, right here. Amplified guitars twanged out peace ballads. Kids, grandparents, even babies were on the Green that day. Along with several hundred other anti-war protesters, I listened to Governor Sargent speak. The following May, Ohio National Guard troops killed 4 students at an anti-war protest at Kent State. College students declared a national moratorium and descended on Washington for a giant peace rally. It was an emergency. I left the League of Women Voters National Convention to call my husband. He packed our 2 young children into the car and drove down to join me in Washington. We left the boys with Bob's sister in Maryland and signed on as pneumo marshals to protect the students who were speaking out against the war. I wore my most conservative dress, not this one, trying to look like a respectable adult who supported peace candidates. We caught a whiff of tear gas, but that protest was basically peaceful. I vividly remember the scene on Lexington Green that Memorial Day weekend in 1971, Saturday afternoon, while the veterans waited for spaghetti. The atmosphere was peaceful, quiet conversations, many songs. I heard friends and veterans singing, chanting, "Bring our brothers home, bring our brothers home." But conflict loomed. Meetings and tense confrontations between Lexington peace activists and town officials were at an impasse. The Selectmen still refused to grant the veterans a camping permit and had secured a court order to enforce their decision. The veterans were determined to stay on the Green. They invited the townspeople to join them. By 10 o'clock in the evening, several hundred people occupied the Green. The police chief used a bullhorn to announce that anyone on the Green after curfew could be arrested. A lawyer friend cautioned me that an arrest record would reflect poorly on my character. An arrest could destroy my dream of becoming a lawyer. I snapped back something about free speech and resolved to join the veterans camping on the green. But I was dead tired. I needed a nap before rejoining the veterans. I stretched out my sleeping bag on our living room floor, just down Parker Street there, and dozed off. Suddenly, I woke up. Very early Sunday morning at 2 a.m., I heard the bells of First Parish ringing, 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 calling me. It was time to be arrested. I worried about how my decision would affect my own family, but I put on my shoes and a sweater and hurried down to the green. It was time to join the veterans and my Lexington friends. When I reached the green, I saw the protesters, all of them, peacefully climbing into the school buses, ready for jail in the old Public Works garage. 14 kids were arrested with their parents and 444 others. Math is a little hard sometimes, you have to subtract. Father Crowley and First Parish Minister Richard Harding were among the prisoners. So were John Kerry and many veterans. And so was my friend Bestor Cram. Bestor, will you tell us how you got to Lexington Green that weekend?
Your character is impeccable. Bullets to greet you. That was the threat I heard when I picked up my phone on Thursday evening at home, just before I was getting ready to head off to Concord to participate in the Memorial Day March, an operation we called Operation POW. I let the FBI know that I had received this call, although I believe that they probably already knew, as my phone had been tapped for numerous occasions. It was also used as a place for training communications detachment from Fort Devens for the U.S. Army. As a coordinator for the New England chapter of the Vietnam Veterans Against the War, VVAW, I had become familiar with the surveillance tactics that were employed by our government. It was often used to follow and disrupt anti-war activities, certainly under a guise of national security, which was a term that became all too familiar. It condoned all sorts of violations of the First Amendment. It was a covert operation called COINTELPRO, later to be banned. We were protesting a war where so many civilian and military officials had failed us miserably. It was a war that had caused thousands of Americans and millions of Vietnamese brothers and sisters to lose their lives in an unnecessary conflict. For me, it was a long journey to gain the vision necessary to stand up and protest a war that should never have happened. I had grown up in a high school supporting Nixon versus Kennedy against the Kennedy during the 1960 general election. I graduated as an Eagle Scout. 4 years later, I graduated from college wearing a uniform of the United States Marine Corps. 9 months later, I was a second lieutenant, commanding a platoon for the 7th Engineer Battalion, 1st Marine Division, just north of the headquarters of MACV in Da Nang in Vietnam. I'd gone through 9 months of training, and I also had attended the 1967 March on the Pentagon. Not so much as a member of Mailer's Armies of the Night, but more as a desperate Marine trying to figure out and make connections to a war I knew so little about. I've learned that one's education is gradual, and that one's courage to speak truth to power comes with practice. I had spent 13 months in Vietnam, from Tet 68 to Tet 69, clearing minefields, building roads, blowing up bridges, and disrupting the lives of people that I had originally believed I was coming to assist. I returned to the United States to become the company commander of 300 infantrymen who were getting their last training before they would hop the bird to head across the pond. My education, although not complete, led me to file for reclassification as a conscientious objector on a just war theory presentation, which at that particular time it still is not an acceptable form of conscientious objection. I was immediately relieved of my command. I was swept away from the possibility of influencing others, and I was challenged by many of my fellow Marine officers who could not understand how a decorated combat veteran could return from war and then file for a CO classification. Before my petition was acted on, my 4-year contract with the Corps ended, and I came home, moving to Boston with my pacifist wife. It was in a copy of Playboy magazine that I saw a full-page advertisement for the VVAW, and I began a 3-year full-time commitment to political activism, including an attempt to spend the night on Lexington Green. As you're watching this, I'm the one with the bullhorn.
I heard that kind of by word of mouth, we're going to retrace Paul Revere's ride in reverse. And the idea was to wake up America, and not that the British were coming, that the war should end. I remember at the beginning there was some mention that we may have trouble in Lexington. But trouble? I mean, what's... You're going to shave my head and send me to the jungle? I mean, trouble? Give me a break.
I felt that what an invasion in my sanctuary. Here I am, I'm safe, I'm home, and these guys, you know, who can say whatever they want, you know, boy, now they're going to come and hopefully just march through. Yeah, just keep on going. Just go about your business. Don't stuff it in my face.
We are marching as an army for peace, in the same patriotic tradition of the Lexington Minutemen who gathered on Lexington Green on April 19, 1775. On that day, the British mercilessly shot Lexington citizens who had assembled together, bonded in their determination to secure their liberty. It is the same bond the Vietnamese expressed in their struggle. We, the Vietnam veterans against the war, are returning to Lexington to bring the war home, to express the truths of the Vietnam War we know too well, and to expose the atrocities, like those of the British at Lexington, that our government commits daily in Southeast Asia in the name of the American people. Just as the Minutemen gathered freely in 1775, we gather freely in 1971. And just as the British judged the Minutemen's act illegal, some may judge ours to be illegal.
Inside this building is the chairman of the Lexington Board of Selectmen, Robert Cataldo, and the chief of police and the town manager. And we have all come down here with advance notice to them that we would like to meet with them and discuss this situation and ask them to reconsider this decision, whereby at the moment they will not allow the veterans to camp on the green. And at the moment they are guarded by 2 policemen protecting them from us.
All Lexington residents, please come over here to petition the Board of Selectmen to allow the GIs to stay here on Lexington Green.
We had heard that the veterans were going to ask to camp on the Lexington Green, and my husband and my kids and I decided to go over and meet them because we had a great deal of respect for them. These were people that had gone over to Vietnam, really knew what the war was all about. What happened on the Green that night certainly would have an effect on all of our lives, and that if dissent in, of all places, Lexington, right next to the birthplace of Thoreau.
And head-on confrontations do no good. They do no good for the town. They do no good for the people who are responsible for the town, and they really do no good for the people who are making the confrontations. And I would hope, and this is, as I say, I don't think it's going to happen, and that's why I feel a little sick. The Board of Selectmen have the authority to tell people they may not be on the green after 10 o'clock, I suppose. I'm not quite sure, but I guess they do. But I just hope that the Board of Selectmen have made the point. They've made the point to the town. They've made the point to the legal authorities. They've made the point to everybody. And somehow, if they could just go home to bed.
The real problem or the real trouble is not going to be the Vietnam veterans. The Vietnam veterans are very peaceful, and I'm sure if we asked them to leave the green, they probably wouldn't. They'd probably want to be arrested, but they would probably be arrested peacefully. The problem exists here, in the town of Lexington. Now wait a minute. We have a group of people that are saying, if they go to the green and say, we're going to remove them, not the police, not the selectmen, but the citizens themselves. Maybe your information didn't bring that to you, but this is the case.
We are assembling at Lexington Green, much like the Minutemen, but unarmed, bonded in our brotherhood of effecting revolutionary change in this country. We now choose to assemble with the spirit of our Lexington forefathers, bearing witness to the illegal, immoral war in Indochina that has made all Americans prisoners of this war.
Our impression was just they were kind of mired in this, local parochial ethic that didn't really apply to what we were doing. And they were too dense to listen. So we were happy that this occurred because we were seeking publicity for our effort, and this was a way to get it.
We had rules, we had regulations, we had laws. We all lived by them since the beginning of time, since the revolution. It was not a veterans issue. It was a very simple issue. Who stays on the green overnight?
After 200 years ago, did they ask permission of the British if they could do it? Right. Second of all, did our brothers in Vietnam ask permission to go over there and die?
When anybody makes a choice, civil disobedience, it still has to be an individual choice. And that really the only place that we've ever slept illegally is in Vietnam. The only place
Okay, all those who are voting for civil disobedience in Lexington, raise your hand.
And saying on this common that we're going to have to place you under arrest.
It was not an organized event. It was something that was spontaneous, and maybe that was what made it so great. It was just people looking at an injustice and saying, no, we won't say yes to this, you know.
So I remember getting arrested by a policeman, and he apologized to me on the way to the bus that he was only doing his job. And I thought, boy, anybody that says that life isn't ironic. That, here I am, I'm back maybe 2 months from Vietnam, and this guy is apologizing to me, explaining that he's only doing his job. I mean, shit, I could write a book about that.
Well, most people, I think, are giving their real names, but I think most people are first saying they were born April 19th, 1775. Some people may say, they're Captain John Parker or Paul Revere. And then after that, they're giving the real information. Everybody came in here as a Minuteman, and so they want to identify themselves as a Minuteman. And I think it's a solidarity.
When I talk to people today who are mostly discouraged about what they can do, and I say you have to go back into history and you have to see where people were as discouraged as you, and you have to go back to the South before 1955 and ask yourself, did people really expect there to be a movement developing in the South? In fact, they talked about a silent generation and so on. And how do things really start? There's people, somebody has to take the initiative. Somebody has to start things off, knowing that not every initiative results in other people following, knowing that there have to be 100 initiatives before something catches on.
Somebody's supposed to ask me now, Nancy, what happened after the protest? Well, Nancy, what happened after the protest? Thank you. The peace protest on Lexington Green was over on Sunday morning. We prisoners paid our fines, $5 each for illegal occupation of the green. And we were released from Concord Court. My husband and kids picked me up at the courthouse. Again, I've got light in my eyes. Okay, sorry. I napped Sunday afternoon while the veterans continued their march on Boston Common for a huge peace rally. Many Lexington protesters worked in the next election to support candidates who promised to respect our right to free speech. 20 years after the protest, local residents formed Lexington Oral History Project to create an historic record of the 1971 protest on Lexington's Battle Green. We collected 66 oral interviews with participants, town officials, and the judge who heard our case. That digital archive is now in Cary Library. It is also available on the internet, and there are green sheets at the back of Parish Hall that tell you where to look. We teamed up with Bestor Cram, who looks a lot the way you did then, to help make his award-winning documentary, Unfinished Symphony. You've just seen clips from it here. It's an extremely wonderful film, as we can see. And Bestor, I'm still blown away by your film, so tell us a little bit about it.
Well, this film was made 25 years ago. Or I should say it was actually made also 25 years after the protest. It was actually made and released back in 2000, so that's more like 18 years ago. It came about because of the public virtue of the Lexington Oral History Projects. It ended up going to Sundance. It has had a continuous life in some regard in terms of being used throughout the country for various different ways in which to both understand what took place back in that era, but also to encourage what might take place in this era. The film is a timepiece of an era that seems like a long time ago, and yet it's also about a movement that continues, that is vital, relevant, and necessary. For myself personally, my education continues, and I continue to practice learning the courage to speak truth to power. When we left Lexington, left here, we headed with our protest to Bunker Hill and then on to Boston's Common. We left confident in our story that we had to tell. We left inspired by the courage of those who had joined us in protest, knowing that this is the path that we would continue to follow. Thank you.